Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mug Up with BB&C. My name is Anise, and with me is Kayla.
Hi, everyone. Good to be back.
Today, we have two very special guests. We have Virgie Lockett and Mark Hiratsuka. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Mark and Virgie are elders from Bristol Bay, and we're so excited to have them on. So I will give you the floor if you would like to introduce yourself and tell us about your ties to Bristol Bay.
Okay, I'll start first. My English name is Mark Joseph Hiratsuka, and I have two Yupik names. On my mother's side of the family, I am known as Gulukbuk, which is the name of my maternal grandfather. And on my paternal side, I am Yukuywak, named after my paternal side, and I was named after my great-grandfather, who was out in the Bethel area. I was born in the village of Ekuk, which is the last village down the Nushagak River. And my parents were the late Mark Mike Hiratsuka and my mother, Mary Manyasa Hiratsuka. Both were lifelong residents of Ekuk. I was raised in the Sasabeth village of Ekuk, Clarks Point, and Dillingham. And I'm happy to be here.
And Virgie, you are Mark's sister, or is it Mark, you are Virgie's brother?
It's my mother.
Because
Other sister? Yeah.
it always is I take after mom.
Oh. Well, who's older?
I'm the oldest, and
Okay.
she's the next after me.
My name is Mary Virginia Hiratsuka Lockett, and I was raised by my nickname Virgie. I went to school with my middle name Virginia. I was raised with my middle name, but by my family members called Virgie. I was born at Kanaknak Hospital in Dillingham, Alaska, and I was raised in Ekuk, Clarks Point, Dillingham, and we lived for years, I don't know how many years, in Queen Fisheries.
Well, we're so happy to have you. And I think this is our first podcast with family members.
Yeah, definitely brother and sister.
Oh, yeah.
So this is fun.
Yeah.
It's like a family reunion.
Okay, so because you guys are siblings, who was the responsible one and who was the troublemaker?
I guess I would have to own up to being not only the responsible one, but also the troublemaker. Exactly. One time I say that because I remember my grandmother telling me a story that she said that my behavior mirrored my Uncle Tommy, her oldest son, who was the oldest in the family, and then followed by my dad and his younger brother, Frank. They're both gone now. But she said my Uncle Tommy used to sit there and rag them on to becoming argumentative and getting after each other. Then he would sit back and smile when they were going at it. So she said, the way you act, Marky, you always remind me of Tommy.
So, Virgie, you would agree
100%
with both
totally.
with both statements that he's the responsible and troublemaker?
Yes, I'm like a follower, or I go my own way.
Okay, I like that. Okay, Virgie, what's one thing people should know about Mark that he may not say about himself?
He never brags about his education. He's very humble about it, very grateful, thankful deep inside, praises God. He loves his family deeply. He's the first in both my parents' family that went to college, graduated, and has many master's and bachelor's degrees, and he never exposes that. My brother is very humble.
What would you say about Virgie, Mark?
Well, she's also a very generous person, and almost to a fault, where anyone in our family, extended family, and even friends who come to Anchorage or need something from Anchorage, she's always there to be counted upon. She always has like an open door policy in her home. I always tease her about that, so I call her up every week. So who's coming from Dillingham now? She's also our Christmas elf in the family, because our extended family has really expanded to a large family now. So we used to give each other gifts to everyone. But now we decided to draw names. But she's still the Christmas elf. She always makes sure that you have a gift from her. So like she said about me, she's a very loving mother, a grandmother, and now a great-grandmother. And she's always the aunt that are her nieces and nephews, now great-nieces and nephews, call her. And she is the first one to give any one of her grandkids, nieces, nephews, what we call Ekuk songs, where she has a special name and a special jig for people. That's what I would say about her.
Oh. Well, what was life like growing up? You guys are pretty close in age, right?
We're about should have been 2 years apart, but year and a half.
So, what was life like growing up in Ekuk?
I think we were a very tight knit family, very close. Lived around our grandmother. We lived around our aunts and uncles and Ekok, and then later in Clark's Point. I think our the families that we grew up with were in Ekok were the winter full time year round residents. In the summertime, when the cannery was open, the village just swelled. People from upriver would come down to Ekok and fish for the company. So it was a fun time in the summer because all our playmates would come back to the village. But in our community, there was the Hiratsukas, the Manyasus, the Hayanos, Kobayashis. They're all Japanese names, but they were married to lady people, local people, and then the Hanson's family that grew up down there as well. So um, I think growing up in Clark's Point and Ekok was a different time for us because we didn't have the conveniences that you have radio, television, um, automobiles, all kinds of things we didn't have, but we didn't miss them because we never knew what they were. We heard about them, but so it was our growing up. We were very much under the tutelage of our grandparents, our uncles, our aunties, or our mom and dad. And it was like we were one big family that took care of each other. So, and during the summertime, of course, Libby McNeil, Libby Camry was located in Ekok. Each one of the villages had a different kind of operations. When we went to Clark's Point, it was Oscar Packers. But Ekok provided all of the benefits that we now enjoy in the city. We had the store there. They had it open year round for us. They had jobs for our families in the summertime, and it provides a lot of opportunity for people to come in and make a living. So it was fun growing up in a small village. We didn't have roads that went from one village to another, but we traveled in the wintertime with dog teams, and in the summer times we went by skiff, upboard, and the only time we could fly was when they were a small air taxi would come and take us to Gillingham or for medical purposes or to go shopping or something. Or in the summertime, we just boated up there. So it was a different time for us growing up in a small village, but it was a very close knit community. Yeah. We were like one big family.
Hmm.
Virgie, were there any lessons that you learned from elders or community members that stuck with you?
Yes, always treat your elders with respect was one of them, and always show kindness. And my dad and mom were really strict on this one. If somebody hurts your feelings or says bad things about you, you don't go after them. You just forgive them and go on. That's where I had the hardest growing up because I'm boisterous. I loved growing up in the village. I'm very thankful and grateful that I was raised that way in a little village. I enjoyed it. If I had to live my life all over again, I would want to be raised just the way I was because it taught me a lot. I'm thankful and I'm grateful for the things that I was told as a child. Especially I'm thankful for my mom and dad.
Oh. You both alluded to this a little bit already, but growing up in a small village, it's very different from growing up in a larger village or Anchorage. And you both have probably lived through a lot of change.
Yes.
So are there any other things that you think feel different from back then to growing up in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s to now in the 2000s?
Well, you know what? Things were so different than they are now. We didn't have television, so our daily evening activities were spent around the table visiting with each other. Grandmas told us stories, mom told us stories, dad showed us how to do this and do that. They kept us entertained, but they were also a purpose for that because they always I remember my dad carving a moose bone. I would just watch him how he did that, and then he told me how my great uncle, I remember, would come to visit my mother and my dad. He was the eldest in her family, and he would sit us down at the table, 1, 2, and he would talk Yupik to us. I understood Yupik, but I didn't understand the kind of language he was because he was a classic speaker. I remember him, it was more like a preaching lesson to me, where he'd sit down and he'd say, uh, "You didn't really pay attention now. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to say. When you grow up, I want you to always follow Jesus. Don't drink really bad." I said, "Don't check out na one." He would preach to me like that. And so I was only just a little boy. And what I remember of drinking parties, I thought, that's what she's talking about. I don't ever want to go about that. And then at one time I told my mom, "How come he's preaching to me?" And then she said, "Because he wants to give you a lesson so when you grow up, you'll remember what he's saying and you won't follow that way." So I learned from him by his storytelling. And when the villagers would come in to my mom and dad's house, my mom and dad didn't have to go out to visit people. They all came to their house because they enjoyed each other. And then so they'd sit around the dinner table, never in the we had a living room, never in the living room. I don't ever remember a time a guest came to the door that, "Oh, come in and sit down." You sit down in the kitchen around the table like this. And that's when they had coffee and tea and whatever they want to put on the table. So us kids would listen in the background because they would tell stories and laugh. And sometimes sadness is quiet, thoughtful things, but they would laugh with each other and just tell stories. And while we might not understand what they were saying, but because they were laughing, we were laughing too. So I think that was something that we appreciated. And one of the things that I remember though, that every home you went to, they had ashtrays, so because they could smoke in the homes. And of course nowadays they don't, nobody does that. But I still remember being a patient in a hospital in Dillingham. They put me in a ward with older people, older men, and even the nurses would come in with cigarettes, and the patients would have ashtrays by their bed table.
Wow.
And it was I remember, being had an eye examination, a petitioner that came to from Dillingham, and while he was examining us, he was smoking a cigarette. So, here's the kind of things that you just never see in, things.
Mhm,
It was certainly a different time.
mhm.
And what I remember the most that we never did lose, I think about 1971, I really first became aware of and wanting to be aware of where I came from. Up until that time, we were assimilated into the Anglo culture, so it was our way of life. But underground, our parents, our grandparents especially, taught us how to think as Native people, how to behave as Native people, and by example, they showed us in our own homes, by their stories, how to engage with people, how to treat other people, and how not to behave. And then they always instilled with us this appreciation for the native dance and stories. And I think one of the things that has existed in this since 1971, that when more of the churches finally recognized what they were doing, because I remember my grandmother said she grew up in Crigillock, Oakville, when they was baptized, that their house was cleansed with things, masks and ornamentation that they used it for their expressions. But she said years later, a missionary told her that they were wrong when they did that because they wiped out the culture and so the schools were did that. But I think we grew up with the idea of just appreciating the way we lived as Yupiks, Native people. And now I think in my old age, I'm going back and thinking how I wish my grandmother was alive to see young people like yourselves, Native dancing and wearing our Native garments and just appreciating our Indigenous backgrounds. I think that I think it's really was one of the nice things I see going into my elder years, to see how connected we are to Indigenous stories and the way of life.
Mhm. Virgie, I want to give the floor to you. We kind of already talked about the differences of, back when you guys were growing up versus now. Do you think anything has stayed the same?
Yes and no. There's so much change because we grew up with the coal oil lamp. And when we were getting ready to go to bed, if we ran out of coal oil, my grandma would take Crisco or lard, put it in a bowl, cut a piece of cloth, roll it, put it, and that was our light till we all went to bed. The iron, she had this iron on top of the stove. It was really heavy, and she had several of them. Before we went to church, I remember her pressing on the table because there was no ironing board, no television. I think I was in high school when I first seen a television. Only no telephone, no electric lights, no flush toilets, no running water, yet hall water. Remember when we used to have to carry water? There was so many no things. I remember her giving Mark and I baths in the sink. If you wanted to talk to somebody, you had to talk on the radio. My mom was a health aide at Clark's Point, and they had a radio there where the hospital from Kanaknak would call once a night so she could give a report. Everything is so different now. The thing that is the same in our family is we communicate a lot. We're close. And I know there's other families that are that way too, that never lose sight of your family. Always be in contact, because down the road, we might not be there. This is what I learned. It's really important to have a deep connection with your family. Because when Mark and I were growing up, there was just the two of us. And he got me in trouble. I tell this really funny story. I know it's not what you...
No.
Oh, I want to hear it.
We want to hear the story.
Okay, my dad would give us money, no dollar bills, coins. We could go up to the store and get some candy. And that was a real treat because we couldn't drink a lot of soda or eat a lot of candy. We had dried fruits to eat. So we'd be really happy. We'd be walking up to the cannery and he'd say, "Let me see your money." And I'd show him. And he'd look at his. And I'd say, "Could I see yours?" And he'd show me. And he'd say, "Virgie, I'll trade you." And I'm like, "What?" He'd say, "I'll give you my nickel for that small one right there." And I'd say, "How come?" He said, "Because it's bigger and you could get more candy." And I would trade all my dimes for his nickels. And when we'd come back, I could never understand why he always had more snacks than me, more candy. But he was really good at that. And then when we lived in Queen Fisheries, he said, "Virgie, I was outside playing with Elizabeth, West Coast, Lind, and her sister, Susie. I came into the house and Mark was in the bedroom and he hollered, 'Virgie!' I said, 'What?' He said, 'Mom and Dad said you could go down the store and buy $20 worth of candy.'" Now, I didn't know what $20. I just hear sometime talk about $20, but I never seen a $20 bill. I didn't know how much it was. And I said, "Who said?" He said, "Mom and Dad said you could go get us $20 worth of candy." Esther Bennis, J.D. Bennis's mother, was the storekeeper at Queen Fisheries. I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yes." So I took off and I went running down the store and I walked in and Esther Bennett said, "What's going on, Virgie girl?" I said, I came to get $20 worth of candy." And her eyes popped. 20? I said, "Yes, $20. Your mom and dad know?" "Yes, they said I could." I went home with a huge bag loaded with candy. Parents came home. "Where'd you get this candy?" "Oh, why'd you do this?" And I said, "Mark said I could." Really quiet. "What?" I said, "Yeah, Mark, you told me mom and dad said I could do $20 worth of candy." We didn't get a spanking. We just got spoken to. After that, never again. I listened to him when he told me I have to go ask my parents, did they say this? But he was good at getting me in trouble.
Wow, troublemaker for sure.
I'm very thankful for the way I was raised. And now I look at my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and I think they're so blessed to be born where you want to go somewhere, you don't need to hitch up dogs. You don't need to bundle up. Um, if you want chicken, you go to the store and you buy it. If you, whatever you want, you can get. Where growing up, my dad used to go hunting. We grew up with wild game. Moose, caribou, ducks, ptarmigan. We ate beaver, fish. My mom had a garden. But leaving Alaska for the very first time, it was very hard. I never seen a cow in my life, a real one. I never seen horses. I've never seen a train, buses. Because we walked to school when we were down at Ekuk. But then when we moved to Queen, we went by dog team. But things have changed so much now. I look at my grandkids and I think, you'll never understand what kind of life we had. But I'm thankful and grateful that we did because it made us wiser, stronger, considerate. And there's things that we go through in life that we heard from our parents and our grandparents how to deal with it. And I'm thankful for that.
And I love that you'll be able to pass your stories down to your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, and hopefully those stories will going through the generation.
But I wished I understood more Yupik. One thing I'll never forget is, "I'm Chimaktin." My gram telling us to hurry up and get up. And how do we say? She tell us to go to bed.
Aminachten.
Oh yeah, Aminachten. And then one time, Mark was so mischievous. He said, well, "Grandma got upset with you. But you were saying something in native, something Itka." And she said, "What's up, Marky boy? You were calling for the ghosts to come in?"
What? Wait, what does that mean? Share.
Mark, tell them.
Well, she used to always say, when you speak of the bear, you always made your voice soft. Somebody down the village saw a bear coming through the back of the village. And so at night they would bring their kids in because the bear was coming. Or sometimes it was just a form of respect. Or if they were going to say, Father is coming down to hold service, but the Father is coming down to hold service in the church. So the Father might come into the house. You guys better be good. So that's the kind of things I was saying. If the bear comes, I'll yell, "Get out of here, bear!" You know, because the bear has the power to hear under the ground sounds, especially when you make fun of them, and they'll come and bother you at night. So, and I used to tease you, get really scared.
Troublemaker. I want to talk about when BB&Z was first formed. You two were probably both in your, early 20s? Is there anything specific that you remember or want to talk about when ANCSA was incorporated or when BB&C was first started?
Well, of course, I was in college during the time it started, so I heard about it. I don't know that I was too curious because I was involved in going to teacher school. So I spent all my time thinking about that. And then while my parents were in the village, Dillingham, they were preparing for native allotments and filling out applications. So I didn't, until I came back to Alaska in 1923 when I started, I was 23 years old, in 1971. And I started my first year teaching. And that's when we had a visitor come to our house. It was like an enrollment specialist they hired. And so she came to the house and she told me what was happening, and then I completed my enrollment papers, and she said, "Since you're from Bristol Bay, you probably wanted to apply for membership in the Bristol Bay Native Corporation." And so that was the first time I'd actually heard about the corporation because I was not doing to it. I heard about it, but didn't question it. So I signed up for that. So that's how I became a Bristol Bay Native shareholder. But that was an experience I've always appreciated. That once I caught on to the why they existed and how important it was a real turning point in the way I had ever envisioned us being a tribe. So that was a turning point in my life to realize what the corporation meant to us. And now that I'm as old as I am and retired, so I'm living off my Social Security. I'm living off my teacher's retirement. And thanks to Bristol Bay Native Corporation, I have a quarterly dividend that allows me to add to my sustenance way of support. I have the benefit of this resource that started 50 years ago. So I remember I started my teaching career in 1971. 54 years later, I was elected the Bristol Bay Native Corporation Elder of the Year a month after I retired. So I feel like my whole life has been in the limelight with the corporation. But that's the corporation means to me is how, as a shareholder, the corporation has my best interests at heart. It's something I didn't realize at the very beginning in 1971, because I think we had like just a mere $100 dollars or that we had for a dividend. And look what we're making today. Amazing. I am very, very fortunate.
Oh, I love that. Virgie, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I'm so proud to belong to BB&C. I'll never forget the day in Dillingham when they came down and had us sign up. I didn't really understand what it was all about, but I got this 100 chairs, and then I started having my babies, and so since I had 100 chairs, I gave my oldest daughter 25 shares, and then I gave my son 25 shares, and I gave my youngest daughter 25 shares, and I kept 25 shares. And I remember when we first started getting checks, it wasn't very much, like $20, I think. Didn't.
Enough for a full bag of candy.
Yep. And when they would get their corporation check, now it was getting a little bit more, and they would call me and say, "Mama, thank you for the gas money," because they just got their drivers. I never dreamed that this corporation would grow blossom and bloom the way it has today. And I am so grateful and thankful because by me giving my children their shares and my sister Docha giving my grandkids 5 shares, my daughter got help to go to her dental school. My son got help to start his college. Candy got help to become an accountant. My firstborn granddaughter is in college, and this corporation is supporting her. And my oldest grandson, this corporation helped him get a CDL. I have so much to be thankful for.
Are you glad for your native check?
Yes, I'm always thankful. In fact, I have everything written down at home. My Social Security, my widow's pension, my native corporation check. This is what I'm going to do. Oh, I'm traveling. I'm so happy because I'm leaving March 5th to go see my great-grandbabies in Arizona. And I get my native check. And I'm like, yay, it's just in time to travel. I'm so happy. I don't have to be wondering, oh, can I get this?
Yeah.
I have to smile when I think about the kinds of things she said. Well, I divided my money up to my grandkids and or my children, and our sister gave 5% to each of her kids. So what did you do? What did you do? I looked at them and I just said, well, I'm saving all mine for myself right now. And my heirs will get it sooner or later. But they're going to have to wait until I'm dead and gone. I tease that way. So I'm very grateful for that. And I'm really grateful that just this past year, the corporation changed the eligibility so that our descendants can become shareholders in the corporation. That's really special.
Well, changing gears a little bit, Mark, you talked about your background in education. Why is education and cultural preservation so important to strengthening our communities? I mean, inside the village and outside in Anchorage.
Well, I think it's important because, for example, it just, for me, not being able to have to share who I really am because we were not allowed to be able to express that kind of affiliation. Like I couldn't say I'm Yupik and I'm this and I'm that. And I was born in 1948, 3 years after World War II, and being Japanese was not something that you broadcasted very much around. You just kept it to yourself. So I was a double whammy about who I was, being not wanting to be a native, not wanting to be Japanese, and those kinds of things. But I still remember 1971 when I had just graduated, was teaching my first class of sixth graders in Bethel, which is the birthplace of my grandmother, who was the Yupik Eskimo. We always knew where we were when it came in the family, and we always respected that, but we didn't bring it outside of ourselves. So it's like holding it here, but don't tell anybody about it. Until 1971, when my grandmother came to visit my wife and I, we just got married that year, and we were living in Bethel. So after 50 years, I brought her back to Bethel so she could visit her family. And it was like in November when I had her sit down, and she was sitting in Minkaching, showing her basket. My wife was reading in another room, and I was just watching her. It was quiet, and I remember asking her, Grandma, what was it like when you were growing up in this time of year? And I didn't expect her to stop and tell me a story, but I was amazed when she put down her basket. She started telling me about how this time of year when the villages would come together and have a potlatch, a big party, and her dad would have her and her 3 sisters perform as native dancing in their village in Nakasra. And then she looked up and she started singing a song in Yupik. And I was just watching her. And then pretty soon, so she started moving her hands, dancing while she was doing this. And then singing the song at the same time. And then gradually moving it, getting more animated and really getting involved. I thought, wow, this is so Yupik. This is so native. Look at my grandmother. When she was done, she started slowing down. And then her voices got softer until she finally put her hands down, looked down, didn't say a word. I was so mesmerized I couldn't interrupt her. I just watched her. And big tears rolled down her cheeks. Just tears. And it made me realize how important this cultural connection was to my grandmother. How could I, as a young man, 23 years of age, just starting my professional career, be embarrassed of where I came from? And I vowed from that point on that if this was so important to my grandmother, she didn't preach to me and tell me, she just showed me how important this was to her. And so from that point on, I had a chance to go back to my graduate college and get my master's, which I got in bilingual multicultural education. So I can become a bilingual instructor and a special educator. And for the last 54 years as an education professional, I'm so glad that my grandmother gave me that gift to understand where I came from. And so I remember coming to speak at the Bristol Bay, the leadership training. We had something, I can't remember what it was. I was invited while I was still working. And I came and I spent 2 days here. I got and had to tell a story. And I told that story. And I told the auditorium changement was just full of people. Every seat was filled. And I had to share what advice I wanted to give to young people today. So I said, well, one of the things I have learned in my life was that in order for me to look at both of you and the people in this room to share my story, I had better make sure that I turned my back to them, because when I look back, I can see my parents, my grandmother, my great-grandparents, and the people before them. I knew where I came from. I knew that's who I was. And when you finally get to that point and you look back to the young people today, I tell people, in order for you to understand where we are and who we are today, make sure you turn your back and look back where you came from and push that for you. So that's my story. I think so in the last 54 years since I graduated, that's been my story. I was as a teacher, as a education director, as a principal, a superintendent. I was a Yupik man, successful in what I was doing, but I'll always stand taller because my grandmother showed me how to respect that.
I love that. That's such good advice.
We talked a lot about the past in this episode. I want to bring it to the future, looking forward. What is your hope for descendants 100 years from now?
Okay, 100 years from now, I hope that this corporation will never die. That it'll continue to prosper, to help my descendants, and they will never forget where they are from and who they are. And sure enough, we call our family Heinz 57 sauce, because we're all mixed. But they'll never lose sight that they're born Alaska Native and always be proud of it, even if it's 1 inch of it. And that they'll never forget their roots or like my grandmother's roots, my dad's, my mom's, our great grandparents. They can go as far back and know where they originated from. And I'm thankful for that.
I think that 100 years from now, I will be just a memory for myself. I mean, to other people. But I think because the opportunity to prosper as a corporation is going to be to the benefit of my descendants. And I look forward to that. I look forward to the time that I mean, if I were to come back, I want to see exactly what I said I want to see them, that my kids have looked back where they came from, and they're facing a future with prosperity, with all the good things in life. And I think that's one of the adaptive qualities of Indigenous people is they have the opportunity to bounce back. But when you bounce back, you take all the attributes that are good, all the attributes that are successful, all the things that make you a better person, a successful person. And I hope that they will be able to say, well, I am a member of this corporation and look what it's done for me. Look at what it's done already since in my time, 54 years. I mean, educated people sitting here looking like you. You're the educated offspring of people that maybe it didn't have the opportunities that you experienced in your lifetime. And oh man, it's going to be better. I just have that hope.
Well, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners before we close?
Could close on my part, knowing that the future benefits that can be realized by my descendants, like my granddaughters, my grandkids, and the generations that will follow, will have the same opportunities that we have had maturing with the corporation. So I am grateful that the board saw its way through sharing the information and have it voted upon to continue the distribution of benefits to our descendants. And I think that's the one thing that I feel really good about. I don't have to say, well, you wait till I'm dead and gone before you get mine. They'll have their own shares that I can add on to with mine. And I look forward to that. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have received the benefits I had so far, but I'm really happy about the future for them. And I'm very grateful for that. So,
Virgie, do you have anything else to share?
Or just about what my brother said. I'm very thankful and grateful because in my time with my children and my grandchildren, I see how they prospered, how this corporation didn't say, oh, well, come back later, well, we'll think about it. They took your interest seriously and they welcomed you and they do their best to help you. Our shares will never die because they'll go from one generation to the next. And to think it started with the Bristol Bay Native Corporation, and I was so blessed to be one of them that I was on the list at the beginning. And 100 years from now, they can say it was our great, great, great grandma. and that just gives me joy. So I'm thankful, and I really appreciate you both for inviting my brother and I in. We had a good time.
Good.
I did.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. As elders, we are so honored to have you share your stories and sharing them with other shareholders and descendants. So thank you again so much for being here and sharing them. It means a lot to us. And I just want to thank our listeners for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you like this podcast, go ahead and give us a follow on Spotify or anywhere you get your podcasts. And we will see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
When you are one Bristol Bay, You share more than a place. You share a future. Distance doesn't matter because your home is here, always. Bristol Bay Native Corporation, always more than a corporation.